All right, let's dive into some deep philosophical waters today. Um, Necessary and sufficient conditions. We're
Yeah.
going to try to really unpack these concepts,
Yeah.
I think beyond maybe what you'd find in like a logic textbook,
Yeah.
into some areas that might even give
Right.
seasoned philosophers pause.
Exactly.
Our guide for this exploration is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry
Mm.
on
Mhm.
necessary and sufficient conditions. It's a bit dense, but it's a real goldmine.
It is.
I think our goal here is to understand not just what these conditions are,
Right.
but how they actually function
Right.
in philosophical arguments and analysis, and how we use them when we're thinking.
Exactly. It's one thing to sort of know the textbook definitions,
Yeah.
but it's another to see how they play out in the wild, so to speak, when philosophers are actually grappling with complex ideas.
Yeah, the source kicks things off with a really classic example.
Yeah.
A locked door.
Right. It's simple, but it illustrates the core concept beautifully. So you can imagine, like, you want to open a locked door peacefully, you're going to need the key.
Yeah.
That key is a necessary condition for
Sure.
opening the door without resorting to brute force. No key,
Right.
no entry.
So if I see an open door and I know no one has broken in,
Mm-hmm.
I can be pretty sure someone used a key.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The beauty of necessary conditions is that they let us make inferences.
Yeah.
If the condition isn't met, the event simply can't happen in the specified way.
Okay, but let's take this beyond everyday examples.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about memory.
Okay.
Wouldn't a past event
Mm-hmm.
be a necessary condition for remembering it?
That's a great philosophical connection. You
Really?
absolutely can't remember something that hasn't happened. That past event is, in a sense,
Yeah.
built into the very concept of memory.
Okay.
Many philosophers would argue that memory is fundamentally about accessing past experiences.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
But the source warns us about something called the standard theory
Yeah.
of necessary and sufficient conditions. Apparently, it's a bit too
Right.
neat and tidy for the real philosophical world.
Right. This theory tries to tie everything back to truth-functional logic.
Mm-hmm.
It says that if a conditional statement like, if P then Q is true,
Okay.
then Q is necessary for P and P is sufficient for Q.
Okay.
On the surface, it seems logical, even obvious.
Yeah, but I'm guessing this is where the philosophical headaches start.
Think about this. If elephants have 4 legs,
Yeah.
then the sun is made of gas. Both parts of that statement are true, right?
Yes, but they have nothing to do with each other.
Exactly. The standard theory leads to some very strange implications because it doesn't care about relevance.
Okay.
It would say that the gaseous nature of the sun is a necessary condition for elephants having 4 legs.
Right.
Which is obviously absurd.
So the problem is that the standard theory focuses purely on whether the parts of a conditional statement are
Yeah.
true or false,
Right.
but ignores the relationship between those
And
parts.
you got it. And this has led some logicians to explore alternatives,
Okay.
like relevance logic, systems that demand a more meaningful connection between the if part and the then part
Yeah.
of a conditional statement.
It seems like the word if in everyday language is doing a lot more heavy lifting than the standard theory
Absolutely.
gives it credit for.
Absolutely. The source highlights this with an example from Macaulay
Okay.
about touching and screaming.
All right.
Think about the sentence, if you touch me, I'll scream.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty straightforward
Right.
cause and effect
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
Touching leads to screaming.
Right. But if we rigidly applied the standard theory,
Yeah.
we'd have to say that my screaming is a necessary condition for
Yeah.
you to touch me.
Okay.
It would be like saying the screaming somehow has to happen first,
Yeah.
which doesn't make any sense in this context.
So the standard theory is messing up the order of things.
Yeah.
It's making the effect into the cause.
Exactly. It's trying to impose a simplistic reciprocal relationship
Right.
between necessary and sufficient conditions onto a situation where that doesn't fit.
Yeah.
It highlights the limitations of that truth-functional view.
And the source throws another wrench in the works with those two statements
Yeah.
about buying someone a cello.
Mm-hmm.
Lambert, I think it shows that if, then, and only if aren't always interchangeable, even though the standard theory might treat them as such.
Right. It's a clever example that exposes the difference
Yeah.
between reasons why something is the case
Okay.
and reasons for thinking something is the case.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Walk me through this cello situation.
So the first statement is, if he learns to play, I'll buy Lambert a cello.
Okay.
This expresses a reason why I'd buy the cello.
Okay.
Lambert learning to play is the motivation for my action.
It's like a condition
Yeah.
that triggers a specific outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about the second statement?
The second statement is, Lambert learns to play only if I buy him a cello.
Okay.
Now, this isn't about causing Lambert to learn. Instead, it's giving us a reason for thinking he's learned. It's like saying, if I haven't bought him a cello, we can be pretty sure he hasn't learned.
I see the distinction.
Yeah,
The cello isn't making him learn in the second statement.
right.
More like a clue or a sign that he's learned.
Exactly. It's about evidence, not causation.
Yeah.
And this is a critical difference
Okay.
because it shows that those two statements aren't equivalent in meaning,
Right.
even though they seem to be about the same situation.
So this standard theory is really starting to crumble.
Yeah.
But if we ditch it,
Right.
are we left with just a chaotic mess of if statements with no clear meaning?
Not at all. The source provides a more nuanced framework by identifying 3 distinct roles
Okay.
that if can play. It's this framework that helps us understand the real complexities of
Yeah.
necessary and sufficient conditions.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What are these 3 roles and how do they change the game?
Welcome back to our deep dive. Last time we left off with this new framework of these 3 roles of if
Right.
that'll help us understand these necessary and sufficient conditions a little bit better.
Yes, I'm ready to move beyond that simplistic standard theory and
100%.
see what this can offer.
So the first role of if is the one we've been most focused on so far, implication.
Mm-hmm.
This is about the logical relationship between statements,
Yeah.
where the truth of one guarantees the truth of the other. It's what that truth functional if-then
Okay.
tries but often fails to capture.
Right, so it's like that geometry example we talked about before.
Yeah.
If a figure is a polygon, then the sum of its exterior angles is 360 degrees.
Exactly.
We can confidently deduce the second part from the first just based on geometrical principles.
Exactly. But now let's look at the second role. If can also express a reason why.
Okay.
This is about causal or explanatory connections,
Okay.
where the antecedent provides the cause or explanation for the consequent.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where the connection between the statements is more about cause and effect,
Right.
not just logical implication. What kind of examples would fall under this category?
Think about something like this. If Audrey wins the race, we will celebrate.
Okay.
Her victory is the reason why the celebration will happen. It's not just a random association. There's a clear causal link.
Ah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the if in that sentence is pointing to the cause of the celebration,
Yeah,
not just implying that the two things happen to be true at the same time.
precisely. Now, the third role of if gets even more interesting.
Okay.
It's about expressing a reason for thinking something is the case.
Okay.
Here, the antecedent provides evidence or support for believing the consequent,
Okay.
but it doesn't necessarily cause it.
Okay. I'm seeing how this is different from both implication
Yeah.
and reason why.
Right.
It's not about a guaranteed logical connection or a direct cause and effect relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about drawing inferences based on evidence.
Exactly. A good example from the source is if Solange was present,
Okay.
it was a good seminar. Her presence is a good indicator that the seminar was interesting,
Okay.
but it's not necessarily the cause of
Yeah.
its quality. It could be that Solange is drawn to good seminars,
Right.
or perhaps her presence somehow elevates the discussion.
So in that case, the if is signaling that Solange's presence
Yeah.
is a piece of evidence that we can use to support our belief
Exactly.
that the seminar was good.
Precisely. And it's a subtle but important distinction.
Yeah.
And it highlights how if statements can function in different ways
Right.
depending on the context and the type of relationship being expressed.
I'm starting to see how recognizing these 3 roles
Yeah,
can really sharpen our philosophical analysis.
absolutely.
It's like we've been given a more precise tool for understanding
Mhm.
how arguments are constructed
Yeah.
and how claims are supported.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It moves us beyond that simplistic idea that all if-then statements
Yeah.
are about logical equivalence. It allows us to see the nuances of how conditions function
Yeah.
in our reasoning.
So where do we go from here? How does this new understanding
Right.
of if statements help us when we're doing philosophy?
Well, it has implications for how we approach concepts, how we construct arguments, and how we analyze theories.
Okay.
One area where it's particularly relevant is conceptual analysis,
Yeah.
that process of dissecting concepts to understand their essential features.
Okay, so we're moving from the realm of logic and language into the world of concepts and definitions.
Right.
How do these 3 roles of if play out in conceptual analysis?
Remember, when we're doing conceptual analysis, we're trying to identify the constitutive conditions
Okay.
for a concept to apply. It's not about finding evidence or explanations for something in the real world, but about clarifying what it means for a concept to hold.
Right. It's about getting at the core of what a concept is,
Yeah.
not just how we happen to use it in everyday language.
Yeah.
Can we stick with the memory example to
Honestly.
illustrate this?
Remember, the standard philosophical account of memory says it's a faculty for tracking actual past events?
Okay.
Now, if we think about the three roles of if,
Yeah.
this means that for you to truly remember something, a past event corresponding to your memory must have occurred.
Right.
That past event is a necessary condition for the concept of memory to even apply.
So we're talking about the first role of if, here,
Yes.
implication.
Yes.
If there's no past event,
Yeah.
the very concept of memory breaks down.
Exactly. Without that past event, we wouldn't be talking about genuine remembering.
Right.
It's built into the very definition of what memory is.
This makes me think of those philosophical debates
Yeah.
about whether we can have false memories.
Yeah.
If a past event is a necessary condition for memory, then a false memory would seem to be a contradiction in terms.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it highlights how understanding the role of necessary conditions in conceptual analysis can have real implications for how we approach philosophical problems.
Yeah.
But it's not just about implication.
Okay.
The other roles of if can come into play as well.
I'm curious to see how those other roles fit into this.
Okay.
Give me an example.
Let's say someone claims to have a memory of attending a particular lecture.
Okay.
Now, they're saying so doesn't cause the lecture to have happened, right?
Right. That would be putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Their claim is a result of the lecture, not the other way around.
Exactly. But their claim can be a reason for thinking that the lecture did indeed happen. It's a piece of evidence, especially if the person is generally reliable
Okay.
and has no reason to lie.
So we're talking about the third role of if, here,
Right.
reason for thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about a guaranteed logical connection or a direct cause and effect relationship. It's about using someone's claim as evidence
Yeah.
to support the belief that the lecture occurred.
Precisely. And this is where things can get really interesting in philosophical discussions because we often have to weigh different reasons for thinking something is the case.
I can see how this would apply to debates about historical events where we might have conflicting accounts
Yeah.
or limited evidence.
Exactly. And it also applies to areas like ethics or aesthetics,
Okay.
where we might have different reasons for thinking a particular action is right
Yeah.
or a particular artwork is beautiful.
So this framework of the three roles of if
Yeah.
isn't just about dry logical analysis.
Right.
It can actually help us navigate those complex, messy areas of philosophy
Yeah.
where there's often no easy answer.
That's right. It helps us understand the different ways in which claims are connected and supported. But remember, conceptual analysis itself isn't just about listing any old conditions that happen to be associated with a concept.
Right. The source emphasized that it's not like looking up a word in a dictionary and picking out any random synonym or description.
Right.
There's something more specific and rigorous going on.
Exactly. Conceptual analysis is about identifying those conditions that are a priori,
Okay.
knowable independently of experience,
Okay.
and essential to the very concept itself.
Okay.
These are the constitutive conditions that determine what it means for a concept to hold.
Okay. I'm getting a sense of the distinction, but could you give me a more concrete example?
Sure.
That term a priori can be a bit slippery.
Think about it this way. It's not like needing to see a photograph to confirm a memory.
Okay.
The requirement of a past event is not about gathering evidence.
Okay.
It's about the very idea of remembering requiring a past event to have happened.
I see. It's like saying that for a shape to be a triangle,
Right.
it must have three sides.
Yeah,
We don't need to go out and measure every shape in the world to know this.
exactly.
It's built into the very concept of what a triangle is.
Precisely. And this is where the distinction between reasons why
Yeah.
and reasons for thinking becomes even more crucial.
Yeah.
When we're doing conceptual analysis, we're not looking for reasons why a past event occurred.
Right.
That's the realm of history or psychology.
Right.
We're also not looking for reasons to believe that a past event occurred
Okay.
that would involve evidence and justification.
So we're seeking something more fundamental,
Yes.
the logical conditions
Yes.
that must be met
Mhm.
for the concept of memory to even make sense.
We're identifying the conceptual constraints that govern the application of the term.
Okay.
It's about getting at the core of what we mean when we use a particular concept.
I'm realizing that this is a really subtle point,
Right.
but it has huge implications for how we do philosophy. If we've misidentified
Yeah.
the necessary conditions for a concept,
Mhm.
our entire analysis could be off track.
That's right. It's like building a house on a shaky foundation.
Yeah.
If we don't get those a priori conditions, right, our entire philosophical structure could collapse.
So we've covered logic, language, and concepts, right?
Are there any other areas where this framework
Yeah.
of necessary and sufficient conditions is particularly relevant?
Well, it plays a crucial role in both mathematics and the sciences, though, in slightly different ways.
Okay, I'm ready to expand our horizons. Let's dive into those domains next. Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been through a lot dissecting the word if,
Yeah.
exploring the limitations of that standard theory,
Mm-hmm.
and even using this framework to analyze those complex concepts like memory.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling there's more to uncover.
Yeah.
What else does the source have in store for us?
Well, it turns out not all if statements are created equal.
Okay.
Some of them aren't really about stating conditions at all.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What are these rogue ifs?
Yeah.
And how do they fit into the picture?
Think about this classic philosophical joke.
Okay.
If Plato wrote the Critique of Pure Reason, then I'm Aristotle.
I get it. It's obviously absurd.
Yeah.
The speaker isn't seriously claiming that their identity depends on Plato writing a book.
He clearly didn't write.
Exactly. This is what we might call a jocular conditional.
Okay.
It's not about laying out actual conditions for something to be true.
Right.
It's using the structure of an if-then statement
Yeah.
to make a humorous or rhetorical point.
So it's more about using if for its comedic effect,
Yeah.
rather than to express a genuine conditional relationship.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it highlights the fact that language isn't always used literally.
Yeah.
We often play with words and structures to create different effects.
Are there any other examples of if statements that don't quite fit the mold?
Yes. Another interesting case is the concessive conditional.
Okay.
This is where the if part doesn't seem to be a condition on the then part in any strong sense.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but my brain is starting to feel a bit overloaded with conditionals.
Okay, yeah.
Give me a concrete example.
Imagine we're planning a picnic and I say, even if it rains, we'll still go.
Okay?
Now, the possibility of rain doesn't actually prevent us from going.
Right.
It's a concession that doesn't undermine our plan.
Ah, I see. The even if signals that the antecedent,
Yeah.
the rain,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't change the outcome. It's like saying, rain or shine, we're having that picnic.
Exactly. And notice that in these concessive conditionals,
Right.
the usual rules of logic don't quite apply.
Yeah.
If we didn't end up going on the picnic, it doesn't mean it wasn't raining.
Right.
There could be other reasons we
Yeah.
changed our plans.
So these concessive ifs are more about expressing our determination
Yeah.
or commitment to a course of action
Right.
rather than setting up those strict logical dependencies.
Precisely. And it shows that the word if can function in subtly different ways,
Yeah.
even within the realm of conditional statements.
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
Yeah, it
I feel like I've gained a whole new level of awareness
Mm-hmm.
about the complexities hidden within those seemingly simple words,
Right.
if then, necessary, and sufficient.
It's a journey that has taken us from everyday examples
Yeah.
to the very heart of how we reason and make sense of the world.
We've debunked oversimplified theories,
Yeah.
explored the multiple personalities of if,
Yes.
and seen how this framework applies to everything from logic and concepts
Mm-hmm.
to scientific explanations.
Absolutely.
So what's the final thought you want to leave our listener with?
Okay.
What's that one brain-tickling question that will keep them thinking,
Okay.
even after this deep dive is over?
Here's a challenge. If a philosophical theory successfully explains something,
Okay.
are its claims reasons why it's true,
Okay.
or just reasons for thinking?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. It takes us right back to that core distinction we've been grappling with throughout this whole deep dive.
It forces us to think about the nature of explanation,
Yeah.
the role of evidence, and ultimately what it means for a philosophical theory to be truly successful.
It's a question that I'll definitely be chewing on,
Yeah.
and I encourage our listener to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
Take those philosophical theories you find compelling and ask yourself, are they providing reasons why things are the way they are,
Right.
or just reasons for thinking so?
It's a question that can deepen your understanding of those theories.
Yeah.
And maybe even lead you to new insights.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into necessary and sufficient conditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a fascinating journey
It has.
into the very foundations of logic and philosophical thought.
Until next time, keep those philosophical gears turning.